Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Selling Greenville, your favorite real estate podcast here in the upstate of South Carolina. I am your host, Stan McCune, realtor here in the greater Greenville area of South Carolina. And you can find, as always, all of my contact information in the show notes should you need to reach me for any of your real estate needs or any questions or any thoughts or any ideas that you have related to the show, anything like that. You guys know how to reach me: text, email, phone call, Facebook message, Instagram message, all of those things. You can reach me at any of those mediums. And honestly, I don't have all of those in my contact information in the show notes, but you get the idea. However you can find me, you can reach me. And as well, as always, I always ask you guys, please rate, review, subscribe, download, unsubscribe, resubscribe, do all of these different things to the show. That's the only way I ask you guys to support the show, outside of potentially referring real estate business to me, of course. But I'd appreciate if you guys could support the show and make sure that you don't miss any episodes by doing all of those things. Today, we are going to be talking about the annual Greenville County tax sale, which is a very interesting thing that happens every year, that the County of Greenville puts on. But this year was the first year in several years that they have actually done it. And they just did it yesterday. I'm recording this on Tuesday the 9th. They just did this yesterday, Monday the 8th. And they didn't do it last year. It was canceled because of the pandemic. They didn't do it the year before because apparently, and I don't remember this, but apparently there was a very random frost sleeting or something event, ice event, that if you guys know Greenville at all, you know that the slightest winter weather that we get shuts everything down. And so apparently that year they did not, back in 2019, they didn't hold it, the tax sale, due to some kind of winter weather event. And so the last time they had it was 3 years ago in 2018. And so they published a list. Obviously, it was a massive list of people that are behind on their taxes. And here's how it works. And I don't know all of the intricate details. I might get some of this wrong, but at least 90% of this is accurate. And let's just be honest, I've never been behind on my property taxes before, so I don't have firsthand knowledge of exactly how all of this works. But the long story short is this: if you are delinquent on your property taxes, I believe it's for a year, then you start to get notice from the county that if you don't pay up your taxes by a certain deadline, then your property, whatever it is, can be sold at auction at the tax sale. And so if your property is sold at the tax sale, you still have it. You still have it for basically another year. But during that year, you have to pay off the taxes. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you also have to pay back the entire bid amount, not just the tax amount, but the entire bid amount, whatever it's sold for, including interest. And the interest is 1%. Well, it's basically 12%. If you wait the entire year, you're paying an entire 12%. The way they work it, it's kind of weird. It's a prorated quarterly 3%. So, if you pay it off in the first month after it's sold at auction, you have to pay a 3% tax, not to exceed your entire tax liability. So, if the property sells at auction for $500,000, but your tax liability was only $2,000, your interest that you're paying is not going to be 3% on $500,000. It's only going to be $2,000, if that makes sense. But that's the only way that you can redeem it. You have a year to do that. And so it's a great option for people that go to the tax sale that just have a lot of money floating around that they need to do something with. They can potentially purchase property, and then they, if it gets redeemed, then they're getting back something close to 1% interest per month at minimum, really. 1% interest per month, or they get the property, one or the other. So this is my first year going to the tax sale and experiencing all of this. And so they published the list several weeks in advance. of 1,200 properties. 1,200 properties. And here's the way the list works. It had what they call an item number, which makes no sense. I don't even know. The numbers weren't in any discernible order or sequence, but an item number, then the tax map number, then the name of the owner, of the property owner, and then the amount of taxes that were due. Excuse me. Notice that's not a lot of information. Not an address, not whether what type of property it is, whether it's just vacant land or a mobile home or a single-family residence. No bedrooms, no bathrooms, no size, no acreage, nothing. So I had to research all of this myself. Now, in 1,200 properties, that would take me like weeks. So I did what any smart real estate investor would do, and I hired a virtual assistant to do this for me. And I had the virtual assistant compile a ton of data on these 1,200 properties. And it took her and her team a good week to get all of that done. So they compiled data on all 1,200 properties. And so then I had about a week or so to then analyze this list and figure out, now I've got the data on all 1,200 properties, but that's still a huge list to have to analyze. And obviously not all properties are the same. And there are so many different ways to analyze it. You can look at it from the standpoint of like, well, which ones are, the nicest homes on this list. That's one way of looking at it. You can look at it from the standpoint of which owner is least likely to pay back their taxes and least likely to redeem this property. You can look at it from that standpoint. You can, obviously analyze it from the standpoint of the type of property. Are we going after vacant land? Are we going after houses? Are we going after commercial real estate, et cetera, et cetera? So there are a gazillion ways. And honestly, the first time I looked at the list, I was just overwhelmed. I was like, where do I even start? So I started with what I am most familiar with, which is multifamily. And I say I'm most familiar with that. That's not entirely true, but you guys know that small multifamily has been a specialty of mine for a long time. That's basically how I broke into real estate. And I knew that the list of small multifamily wasn't going to be a huge list, whatever it was out of the 1,200. And I know from an investment standpoint, because I was approaching this from an investment standpoint, it would be very quick and easy for me to analyze those. So I started there. And I immediately realized there is not going to be hardly any multifamily that even made it to the tax sale. Because remember, people still, until the very day, basically the day before the tax sale, they could still pay up their taxes. So I analyzed the multifamily and concluded there was really only one that stood out to me as likely to actually make it to the tax sale. And I was correct. There was one lady that owned like 10 duplexes and quadruplexes and whatnot. And I did a quick little background search on her and found that she lives in like a mansion in downtown Greenville. I was like, okay, that lady is going to pay off her taxes. And sure enough, she did. Like a day or two later, everything was paid up. So I started researching everything by all of the other criteria I could think about. And so the way I approached it was I decided to look at it from the standpoint of what are the properties on here that have the highest tax liability, because I figured that those are the least likely for people to pay up on them. Those are the people that are probably so far behind, they're never going to get caught up. And so that's what I did. So I analyzed hundreds of properties on this list and basically pared my list down to, it ended up being about like 35 properties out of the 1,200 that I was interested in. And then I spent basically the equivalent of like an entire workday. I broke it up because I can't just spend an entire workday doing this, but I spent basically the equivalent of an entire workday just driving by these properties. Because like I said, not all properties are the same. And it was actually a very useful experience from the standpoint of the tax sale. Because for instance, there was one property that wasn't there anymore. Like the house, you can look at it on Google Maps, et cetera, et cetera. There's a house and you drive by and there's no longer a house there. I don't know who picked it up and took it, but there's no house. Some homes were like shacks, just awful, completely had like trees growing out the windows, things like that. Other homes were really nice. And the crown jewel of it all for me was these 2 homes right in downtown Greenville. And they had a pretty steep tax liability going back several years. And I was like, okay, these have a pretty good chance of making it to the auction. But guess what? Literally the day before the auction, that dude paid up. And I was not happy about it. But literally he waited until the 11th hour to pay up, to make sure that he kept those properties so they didn't go to the tax sale. And he's fortunate that he did. So I went to the tax sale armed with a lot of data. It was kind of like those of you that have played fantasy football with me, typically in a fantasy draft, I have like a lot of different sheets and a lot of different things I'm analyzing to assemble my fantasy football team. It was kind of a similar look for me going to the tax sale. And by the way, I didn't even mention this tax sale. There's so much that I could do like 5 episodes on this tax sale because there's so many different angles that I could approach it from. But one of the funniest things about this was how antiquated the whole process is. I mean, this is old Greenville, right? We talk about how progressive Greenville is and it's the new South. Okay, the tax sale is the old South. This is how they have done it for however many years. And so I looked up on their website, this is a few months ago. I looked up, if the tax sale was happening. I knew it always happened in the fall. The website was not up to date at all. Did not have a whole lot of information. It just had a phone number for the tax sale desk. So I called the tax sale desk, and they were just like, "Oh yeah, you'll need to call us back in a few weeks. We'll have pre-registration, blah blah blah." So I called back in a few weeks, and they said, "Okay, on this date," they gave me a date. You have to come in person and pre-register. And I was like, okay, great. Day before that date, I called them back, just confirming, hey, I just want to make sure tomorrow morning is when we're pre-registering for the tax sale. Yes, tomorrow morning, we open at, I think it was 9 o'clock, whatever. I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know if this was going to be like real estate Black Friday with a massive line. I actually got there like an hour ahead of time, and there was like nobody there. And I hope I didn't start a trend. There did end up being some people showing up, 15, 20 minutes before, including some people from Atlanta. So it was generating that much interest. So I went in there to pre-register. And reminder, this is weeks before the tax sale. We go in there, and, there's maybe 15 of us going in there to pre-register. And by the way, they're only taking 100 registrants. So it was, the stakes are high. So we go in there, and I went up to the tax sale desk, and lady comes over, and I'm like, I'm here to pre-register for the tax sale. She looked at me like she was confused why we were all there. And it was like, we're here to pre-register for the tax sale. And she was like, no, sir, we're not doing that until next week. And I was like, no, I called multiple times last week, including yesterday, and was told that you guys have pre-registration for today. We have people who drove up from Atlanta. They called yesterday and were told the same thing. You need to have us pre-register. So I don't know what the miscommunication was there, but thankfully she was accommodating. Basically, the way it worked, we all had to give a form of ID. Then they give you a card, a big card with a number on it. And that's the number that you hold up when you're bidding at the auction. And then they have your driver's license tied to the card. So then at the tax sale, when you put your number up, if you win the auction, they already know who you are. And they do that because if you win and you don't have the money to pay, right then and there, you get a $500 fine. So you have to have all of the money for your total bid amount for any of your bids at the tax sale in the form of cash or a certified check made out to the Greenville County tax collector. All right, so that's the background story. It and how antiquated that process was. Well, then the tax sale itself was really funny. So I got there, about 30 minutes in advance. The place was packed, and one of the employees at County Square, it was in the county council chambers, so where the county council meets when they're doing public hearings and whatnot. The parking lot was packed. An employee in County Square was like, "What is everyone here for?" And she asked me this, and I was just like, "Oh, it's a tax sale." And went inside, and I mean, it was packed in there. Now, there were still a few seats left, so I was able to get a seat near the front. Those of you that know me well know I'm hard of hearing. I make sure that I'm near the front so that I can be close to the action and actually hear what's going on. We were all in there shoulder to shoulder, standing room only. There were people like sitting like on the stage because there was a little stage platform area. Two auctioneers. They did their little, auctioneer, the auctioneer thing. It took me a while to kind of get used to that because I participated in foreclosure auctions before, but it's a different vibe altogether. This was like a legit tax sale auction. They had to go through hundreds of properties, so they had to do it quickly. And there was a lot of stuff for sale here. Again, like I mentioned, vacant land, commercial properties, homes, mobile home parks. All sorts of different things were for sale at this auction. And it became apparent right away that I was not going to be participating very heavily in this auction. I had done my homework. Of course, I could look around and see that the vast majority of the people in there had not done their homework. Like everyone had I shouldn't say everyone, but the people that hadn't done their homework, they had their phones out and they were like clicking on like the county tax website to like see what properties were coming up next. There was one guy directly in front of me that was throwing around hundreds of thousands of dollars at this auction. I don't know if he, represented a developer or whatever the case may be, but I only stayed for 3 hours, and that didn't even get, let's see here, I've got the pages in front of me. There are 14 pages that I printed off worth of properties, and we got through, during the 3 hours that I was there, we got through 5.5 pages. So this was an all-day event, if you wanted it to be. But during that 3 hours that I was there, a guy in front of me probably dropped like $750,000. And I'm sure he dropped a lot more money in the preceding hours. But here's the thing, like the opening minimum bid is the tax liability. So the minimum bid amount is like next to nothing. And so like, for instance, those houses that were downtown, like really nice, big houses downtown, like the minimum bid for them was like $5,000. And I've heard and I've witnessed this, people getting properties super cheap at this auction. That was not the case yesterday. Now, I don't know, maybe towards the end of it, maybe people started running out of money, but from what I saw, I don't think that happened. And so what I was seeing was, like I said, people just slinging money around like there was no tomorrow. I mean, it was, there were tracts of land, like there was like 15 acres in Berea that sold for like $450,000. There was all sorts of like if a house came up. So if land came up, like a small little piece of land, the auctioneers would do it. We would start at the minimum bid, and then people would go up, 100, 200, whatever the case may be. It would go up slowly. If it was a house, it was like, all right, starting the bid at, 2,800. All right, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000. It just started going up by 10,000s. And it was like, there was at one point, there was this big old dude with like a shirt that barely got below his stomach. A big old dude like that was standing room only, but had found a place to sit like up in the front on the stage, like next to where all the official tax people were. And at one point, he just literally rolled backwards in discouragement and just like flashed us all his stomach, and that was gross. There was a very interesting crowd in general here. The lady next to me like was very flirty with like the dude behind her that was probably maybe 30 years younger than her. And was like right up against me as well. Like I kept like kind of pulling away, trying to reposition myself in a way that like her leg or foot or arm or whatever wasn't touching me. It was like, yeah, we were shoulder to shoulder, but listen, the dude next to me wasn't pressed up against me like that. The whole thing was, and it was also annoying. Like I said, she was flirty with the dude behind me. I mean, they were talking the entire time. She did not even have one of those placards to be able to bid. Why was she there? And the dude behind me she was talking to, he was completely unprepared. He had no idea what he was doing. And it was clear that a lot of people in there were that way. And probably about an hour in, maybe 2 hours in, a good quarter of the people, maybe more, just gave up, just left. And like I said, I already knew by then that I was not going to be doing anything in this, but I had already invested all of that time. And so it's like I wanted to stay there and see how things played out. And so there were a few interesting things that happened. So one thing, probably the most fascinating thing, and the only thing that I considered bidding on, was there was some land that was being auctioned off, and I need to go back and look if it had like a commercial stuff on it or whatever the case may be. But it was being auctioned off, and it was starting to knock on the door of like $600,000. All right, people were going back and forth. It was getting up to $600,000, and the auctioneers are doing this. And while this is happening, the actual tax collector comes out. And I need to mention the tax collector, hilarious guy, also Old South. He like gave this whole spiel about how Greenville is such a great place, and the greatest thing about Greenville is the people. Like that's how he introduced the tax sale. Anyway, that was really funny. That was at the beginning. I felt like I was in like some podunk Alabama town when he did that. But he seems like a really nice guy. Anyway, he comes out during the bidding and just kind of casually sits down and then looks at what they're bidding and goes to the microphone and he was like, "By the way, that land is contaminated." And the auctioneers look over at him and they stop their sing-songy voice getting the bidding up. And it's just like quiet for a second. And they're like, "Is that a big deal to everyone?" And several people are like, "Yes, that is a big deal." And so they're like, "Okay, we'll restart the bidding." So remember, this land was about to go off, about to be sold for close to $600,000. Now nobody wanted to touch it. And the one guy that I said was in front of me that was slinging around money, he got it for $35,000. Now, I had done no research on that land. So I had no idea, and I'm not the type that I'm not going to like quickly try to look it up on my phone like some of these other people and try to figure it out. $35,000 is meaningless to people that have a lot of money, but that's a good chunk of change for me. Let's just be honest here. I'm not just throwing $35,000 out there on a whim. But I was tempted to. I was really tempted to because I knew we had just seen in the market that land, if it could be decontaminated, is definitely worth $600,000. There were multiple parties that would have paid in the 500s for it, and someone got it for 35. I don't know anything about decontaminating a property. I don't know what it was contaminated with or anything. I mean, it could have been plutonium for all that I know. But that was the closest that I came to actually putting in a bid, was just because it was like, man, I mean, what could be involved with decontaminating a property that could make it that much less valuable than it was before? I don't know. That guy probably got an absolute steal with that. He may not have even known what the deal was with contamination, but obviously he had some money. And so it was probably just one of those, I'm just going to take a risk with this. And I was close to being willing to take that risk. I wasn't willing to, but I was close. I was really close, really tempted to. Another interesting part was when the real estate for a commercial building, which I looked up, it appears to be some kind of dollar store, which I guess it's not the business that was for auction. You have to remember a lot of businesses lease the space that they are in, so this must be a situation where the dollar store is leasing their space. I believe it was in Berea. And the name of the owner was just like a woman. And she owed like $30,000 in taxes. And by the way, that probably sounded really degrading. The name of the owner was just a woman. I didn't mean it in that way. It's most of these properties, if they were commercial, they were owned by like another business. So it was just surprising just to see what appeared to be just a regular person's name on there. If it had been a man or whatever, it would have still been just as surprising. Just the fact that there was just a plain Jane name there of a person that appeared to own the real estate for this dollar store was surprising in and of itself. During my time there, that property is the one that sold for the most. It sold for $1.625 million. And the guy that won the bid looked like he was in his 20s, maybe his early 30s. And the auctioneers there was a guy in the front, not the guy that was directly in front of me, but another guy kind of to my left, who was going back and forth with this guy. And the auctioneer, tried to get it to 1.65, and the guy bid on it. And then he was like, you know what? No, I'm pulling my bid back. And so it was kind of like that was the most interesting moment, because it was like, okay, that's a lot of money being slung around here again. And the auctioneers were like, okay, are we done here? Nobody else is bidding. All right. And actually people clapped, because it was such a, we just didn't expect those. A lot of us didn't expect those numbers to be thrown around. I didn't expect that. I was just thinking, what a shame. That lady, she had a property worth $1.625 million at the tax sale. It's probably worth even more than that on the open market, and she lost it because of $30,000. She couldn't come up with $30,000 or put the property up for sale last year. Sold it for every day for $1 million, just like that. She lost it over $30,000. And that was the case with a lot of these. That was what was amazing to me. Things were being sold at this auction at retail. And that was, at the end of the day, why I didn't make a play on it, was because it was like, I see better deals than this. I mean, none of this is better than just if these properties hit the market on the MLS. And so that was the most amazing thing to me. I think these people that are letting these properties go based on the fact that they owe taxes, they don't realize the way the market is right now, they could just list these properties as is and make money back, get those taxes paid off, and not just lose the property. There was what was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I had two properties that I was kind of targeting kind of in the middle of the auction, towards the middle. And like I said, it became apparent very quickly that this was not going to be an auction where I was going to make a play in. But these two properties that I knew would be coming up around noon, which was when I planned to leave, I wanted to hold off and just see what they sold for. And the one was kind of a decent looking little house in Taylor's, and the other one was like a shack in like the west side of Greenville. And by a shack, I mean like it was really, really run down. Like all the drive-bys I did, I gave the properties a score from 1 to 10, with 1 meaning like demo and 10 meaning, like turnkey, you wouldn't have to do anything to it. None of them were a 1 and none of them were a 10 that I drove by. But this property that I'm referring to as a shack was a 3 out of 10. I mean, it was really, really bad. It sold for $80,000. The Holman's Taylor's that was pretty nice, sold for $160,000. No way. No way. I'm not buying a shack on the west side of Greenville for $80,000. People are losing their minds. That is not a good deal. Like it did not make sense to me what was happening outside of the fact that people don't have better ways of getting deals than that tax sale. They literally thought that was their only option. That's the only thing that I can figure. Now I will say that and I should mention that that's the inventory issues that we're having, right? There are not houses or properties for sale, and so now here we go. We have a tax sale, and it's like finally there's all these properties for sale. People have been waiting and starving for properties to come on the market for so long, and I think that people were just so eager to get anything, and so they were just throwing money around. And I'm sure there were several developers there, and then they were probably the ones that were bidding up, those large tracts of land, because that's really a dry market for developers right now. It is hard for them to be able to buy acreage, to be able to develop new subdivisions and whatnot. So that didn't come as a surprise to me, but. That is really what I just said before is really my main takeaway from this whole experience. And I don't know if I'll do it again. I might have to wait for the market to correct a little bit. But yeah, my big takeaway was that this market is so nutty right now. And yeah, people are like, oh, the market's slowing down, right? Well, yeah, it's the seasonal slowdown. It always slows down in November, December, this time of year. But if you gauge the market by that tax sale, things were selling for what they would sell pretty much on the open market at that tax sale between 100 bidders. And I don't know if they opened it up to more people because there were way more than 100 people in there. But like I said, there were some people that had no business being there. They weren't going to bid anyway. But at the end of the day, I'm shocked. And I talked to a real estate wholesaler recently that is trying to sell me some property. And I was like, why isn't this seller just putting this up on the market? And this wholesaler said, well, they'll make more money going the wholesale route than they will on the open market. You can't sell this type of property. It needs too much work. You can't sell it on the open market. And I didn't argue with them. I just kind of inwardly laughed and was like, no, that is 100% not true. In this market, you can sell anything as long as you price it correctly. And when it comes to these properties that need a lot of work, I mean, it's going to sell. It is going to sell. Again, unless you just put it on there for way, way too much. There is a market. There is a lot of money being thrown around in real estate investing right now. And remember, like I said, these people, they had to have the cash at the auction. I was thinking, I was like, man, and it had to be made out to the Greenville County tax collector. I was like, obviously they would get busted, but it was like, if ever there was an event where someone should try to rob a bunch of people, that would be it, right? Obviously, I'm not advocating for that. And there were sheriffs in there. They were going to make sure that nothing went awry. But it was like, I was just looking around, just being like, I wonder what the total amount of money is in here. I mean, it has got to be tens of millions of dollars held between the 100 people in here that have money, 100 or more, I guess. And that's the story of real estate in Greenville right now. It is a story of a lot of money being thrown around, a lot of properties being sold for more than they should be. And listen, if you're behind on your HOA dues or your taxes or whatever, before it gets out of control, sell the property. You'll get back your money. If you've got a loan on it, you'll probably be able to pay off the loan. I mean, there is all sorts of money being thrown around that you will be able to sell the property. Don't let it go by the wayside. I doubt any of my listeners are in that situation, but I'm just putting that out there because I was just amazed by some of these properties that sold, that had a couple of $1,000s of tax liability. That one that I mentioned, let me look it up. The one that was $160,000 that sold for $160,000. That lady, or that man actually, owed less than $4,000 in taxes, and his house sold for $160,000. Like, it's really sad, to be completely honest. But that's the way it works. Now, they have a year to redeem it. We'll see. I'm curious to see how many of these get redeemed based on the prices that they went for. I don't think very many are. I think a lot of these are going to end up going to the buyers. And at the end of the day, I think another big takeaway, if I make a play in the tax sale again, I need to go back through and look at the properties that sold cheaply. But I think most of the opportunities at this event were small lots. That seemed to be where the actual possibilities of buying something below market value is if you just want to buy small lots, put a house on it, whatever. That was, generally speaking, where it appeared that there were opportunities. I need to go back and kind of cull through the list. I don't know. Maybe if I have time to do that, I might do another episode on that. Probably not, but you never know. I don't plan these things out very far in advance, as you guys can probably tell. I just kind of go with the flow and let you guys know what's on my mind. That's it for today's episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, my contact information is in the show notes. You guys know that. Please, if you like the show, make sure you're subscribed, leave a rating, leave a review, leave a kind note, hit that 5-star button to let everyone know that you love the podcast. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate everyone listening. Thank you for listening. Thank you for enduring my tax sale story. I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. Stay safe, stay warm, enjoy the nice fall weather. We'll catch you next time.